A large explosion called the Divine Strake Test was scheduled to be detonated on June 2, 2006 at the Nevada test site, 65 miles north of Las Vegas. The Nevada test site is a location where over the course of 4 decades more than 900 nuclear tests were conducted in the desert. The controversial Divine Strake Test will detonate 700 tons of chemical explosives buried 20 feet below ground. The test will simulate the destructive effects of shock waves from a low-yield nuclear weapon on underground bunkers with the goal of creating the least collateral damage. Both Los Alamos and Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico participated in developing the Divine Strake Test. Data collected from the test will be used to continue work on the design, construction, and use of new nuclear weapons. Citizens who have heard about the Divine Strake Test continue to ask, why are we doing this? Members of the Western Shoshone, the most nuked nation in the world, denounce the Divine Strake Test as an affront to Mother Earth and to indigenous peoples worldwide. Downwinders, those who suffered serious adverse health effects as a result of radioactive fallout from decades of nuclear testing at the Nevada test site, feared the massive blast would lift toxic radioactive materials from past nuclear explosions into the air, spreading across the country to contaminate their lives once again. Advocates for peace from around the country pronounced the Divine Strake Test a significant step towards a new nuclear arms race that would encourage other countries to acquire nuclear weapons of their own. On May 26, 2006, the National Nuclear Security Administration announced that the Divine Strake Test would be delayed indefinitely due to the public's need for more information about the potential environmental and health effects from the blast. Activists declare the postponement a small victory. However, the issues they've raised haven't gone away.
Citizen Alert is an environmental justice organization that started 31 years ago here in the state of Nevada. Our number one job is to make sure that people are safe, and especially people who are indigenous, people who are low income, people who have color, that always seem to be the ones that are put in place by our government where they are totally impacted by where they place things. They don't place things in the neighborhoods of the rich and famous, and so we look out for those kinds of areas of concern. I was back east when I got a phone call that it had been announced that there was going to be a mushroom cloud over Las Vegas. And I called right away to the press that I knew here. And so they said, well, it wasn't really going to be a mushroom cloud. And they said, what do you think about that? And I said, we are vehemently opposed to any test that produces anything, whether it's a mushroom cloud or a firebomb. They can't do something like that without an environmental impact statement. And I'm telling you right now, even not being in my office, but being back east, that we are inalterably opposed to it, and we will fight it. This test is 700 tons of ammonium nitrate that they are going to blast out at the test site. Now, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency and the National Nuclear NNSA Security Administration are saying, well, this is just for conventional bomb testing. Well, I'm sorry, but there is not any kind of an airship that can cart 700 tons of anything in order to drop a bomb anywhere. And we are firmly convinced that this is modeling for nuclear weapons. We believe it's either for mini nukes or for nuclear bunker busters. And that makes us very alarmed because we feel that this is totally against the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It is totally against the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. They ought not to be doing it. We think that's a precursor to again doing testing of nuclear bombs out at the Nevada test site, and we will not allow that to happen. When I got back to town, I started calling people about the Divine Strake. I called the Western Shoshone Defense Project. We started working. I called Bob Hager, who is an attorney, and asked him if he would like to start thinking about doing this as a pro bono since we have no money, which he was very excited about because it tied in with what he'd been doing for the Western Shoshone. We pulled together a statement that talked about what we saw as the three main problems in letting this thing happen. The first, of course, is environmental health. We were not sure that they could prove to us that there wasn't some benign radionuclide dust on the floor of the test site, that when meeting a 700-ton explosion would not become excited and therefore be tossed in the air and become reactivated, again causing a threat to downwinders as the nuclear bomb tests had done in the past. So we started calling some downwinders to make sure that they understood that there might be consequences for this thing going off. Our second concern was that this become a precursor to building nuclear bombs. And of course, right about that time, this administration started making little, jungle sounds about maybe going out and bombing Iran and their nuclear facilities, which were underground. And of course, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency said at first, well, this could be something about nuclear bombs, but then it came out and said, well, it really wasn't about nuclear bombs. And then one of their spokeswomen told a member of the press here that it was such a blessing that the Nevada test site so closely resembled the geography of the Middle East. So we thought, I wonder if that's why they're rushing to get this done without doing the proper environmental impact statement, which takes about 2 years to complete, that they have a timeline, like maybe January or February, to blow off this nuclear bunker buster in Iran and using it as a threat against Iran. We believe if we're telling the rest of this world that they cannot build anything nuclear, then we need to look in our own backyard and we not build anything nuclear as well.
I live here.
Okay. And your name is?
Donna Daly,
And you live in Las Vegas?
and I live in Las Vegas.
Okay. And so, what do you know about the testing that they've done out in the desert north of here?
I know that some of it was done underground, and some of it was done above ground, and some of the people who were close to the above ground testing have been very sick, except for that's why I don't approve of any type of nuclear testing anywhere.
All right.
But I don't think they should be storing it at Yucca Mountain either, which they're trying to get past.
Okay. Did you happen to hear about this last test that was
Last
just
test
postponed?
yeah, I was going to say it was postponed because of the people against it.
Do you have an opinion about the billions spent in our country on nuclear weapons programs?
Well, I think if we're going to go against the other countries, like we're telling North Korea they can't have them, we're telling Iraq they can't have them and stuff, we shouldn't have them either. And we should not be spending money on something we should not have.
Tell me how you found out that the test was postponed.
Yesterday, I came in from a meeting that ended up being a very long meeting, and I had a phone call from one of the local reporters saying, "Congratulations." I said, "Oh, what did I do now?" And he said, "You guys won." I said, "We won what?" And he said, "We just got a press release from the National Nuclear Security Administration that they have postponed indefinitely the Divine Strake Test." I said, "You're kidding." He said, "No." He said, "They have postponed it indefinitely." So I said, "Well, I need to get something on it." He sent me a copy of the press release. And indeed, it said that they were withdrawing the FONSI, which is the findings of non-significance. And they had put it off. So then I called Bob Hager, the attorney, and he said they had had a hearing over the telephone with Judge Lloyd George, and he felt totally that this isn't going to happen, just from the tone of the hearing. And I was just stunned. I mean, I was feeling, we're going into court on June 8th, and that, that I thought that on June 8th we would find out that we got the injunction, because I had just read all of the affidavits prepared by the experts, and I was just blown away by the breadth of their experience, by their qualifications to make the statements that they were making. And I thought, how can the government fight this? Well, the government had received those affidavits, and I think that they felt that they could not fight it, at least at this point, when they read the affidavits. I think that they got caught. I think it was postponed because I think they got caught with their pants down. I think there was such a rush to get this done that they only did an environmental assessment and said there was a determination of non-significance. But when a scientist who was involved in that determination says, well, we drove through the desert and we had a Geiger counter or a dosimeter in our hands and we put it out the window, and it didn't register. That is not how you determine if there are radionuclides on that desert floor where they have been testing. A couple of weeks ago, one of the NNSA staff called me and he told me that we really had the wrong idea about what was happening. And I said, well, what kind of a wrong idea do we have? And he said, well, it's perfectly safe. It's not going to be a mushroom cloud. And I said, well, I get that it's not going to be a mushroom cloud. It's only going to be a 10,000-foot firebomb. I said, but we believe that that's going to raise up some of that dust. And he said, well, you don't understand where we're doing it. There's no radionuclide dust. And I said, well, Kevin, I think that's a miracle. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, when you were doing all that testing, I said, we know it's been documented that that dust settled places in Maine. And I said, and you're telling me that a mile from where you were blasting bombs before, that there's no radionuclide dust on that desert ground? I said, it's a miracle, don't you think? And at that point, the battery in my phone ran out and it just died. And I haven't talked to Kevin since, but I'm wondering if he's thinking that it's a miracle too. It's been interesting about reactions here in Las Vegas about this Divine Strake Test. Our phone has not stopped ringing since we came out against it. Yucca Mountain, I think, has, as far as Las Vegas, has a far more of an impact on Las Vegans because it could hurt the economy. But we've lived with Yucca Mountain so much here that it's kind of, I don't know how people are feeling. 75% of the people in this state are against Yucca Mountain, but it doesn't quite get people's juices going the way that the Divine Strake has gotten it going. And people, it impacts people in St. George, Utah, or in Idaho, in some of the rural counties in Idaho, or in Montana, in a far more physical way. But people here have absolutely been enraged by the fact that we can do this again. It kind of has taken my breath away because the phone hasn't stopped ringing. People that don't have transportation wanting to get out there because of the high price of gas. Are we going to be doing any carpooling to get people out there? People want to go there and make their voices heard, that we cannot allow this. It's absolutely just totally invigorated my faith about people in Las Vegas. This whole Sin City, people here don't care, we're just here for the strip clubs and the gambling. People in Las Vegas care, and they care very deeply about what this country is doing.
Witham, and we were wondering if we could videotape your opinions about nuclear weapons testing here in Nevada. Do you know?
I really don't know what to say.
Do you live here? Are you from here?
Yeah, I live in Nevada, yes. I really think they don't have to spend as much money as they should on defense and military and nuclear weapons. I mean, what are you going to use nuclear weapons for these days, you know? I mean, you go and you fight a war, you're fighting terrorists, you're not fighting a country.
Good point. What would you rather see the money spent on? If you had control?
Education or something like that? Something positive?
Do you have an opinion about nuclear weapons?
Not particularly, no, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I reckon there shouldn't be any, but...
Oh, that's a good opinion.
That's about it. That's it. You know, if they can do without them, all well and good. You know, fair enough.
What is your opinion about the billions of dollars that the United States spends on nuclear weapons?
My opinion? It could be spent in better ways.
I look at this country as a place that is fear-based. I look at people that are just terrified, and we have an administration that fosters that fear and fosters that terror, you know, and this whole buildup to war is totally frightening to me. Somebody said to me when I mentioned, you know, that we thought that the Divine Strake was a precursor to nuclear weapons and that, you know, they wanted to go out and bomb Iran. Somebody said, well, they're not going to do that. And I said, don't be so sure that they're not going to do that. I said, you know, this administration only has a couple more years. And I said, they've gotten Iraq out of the way, and they still have Iran, and they still have North Korea, and they still have China. So I said, I'm not putting anything past this administration. I said, they want you to be afraid. They want you to be very afraid. And I think the amount of money that we're spending on weapons, the amount of misspent money that we're putting in Homeland Security is all based on keeping us afraid. And I find that absolutely reprehensible. From now on, we are going to be more vigilant about what they are doing at that test site. We cannot allow this government to think that they are the nuclear watchdog of the world, and they need to have a bite taken out of them. And we intend to make sure that that's happening, that they are not going to be allowed to do this.
Are you preparing for some celebration because of this postponement?
You know, I got a phone call from the Associated Press and said, so you won, so are you canceling your protest tomorrow? And I said, well, you know, when we first started planning this protest, we knew that we were going to be going into court prior. At that time, the court case was going to be scheduled for May 23rd. And it was kind of like, well, what do we do if the judge grants the injunction? And we've already told people we're having something at the test site. And I said, well, if we don't win, it'll be a protest. If we win, it'll be a victory celebration. So since we've won, I think we need to call it a victory celebration. I know that it kind of has taken the edge off for a lot of people that may not go because they think, well, it's canceled, so I don't have to go. But I sent out a press release to all of our supporters, and it reaches about 3,000 people. And I said, we've won, and this is going to be a victory celebration, but we need to all work together to make sure that we can sustain this win. One of the guys from the NNSA told one of our local reporters, well, they've won this battle, they haven't won the war. So in my press release, I said, sticking together, we will win this war. And so I'm hoping that people will go out there because I think it's going to be a celebration. I think it's turning into a little bit different event than we had originally planned. You know, we were going to be out there, you know, just really, you know, being protesters and being angry about this. I think that what we're saying is we've won this round. but we need for all of you to stick with us. We need to have as many eyes as possible watching what our government is doing so that eventually we will win this war.
Many, if not most of us, would be willing to put ourselves on the line for our country, if asked. But we are not willing to sacrifice our grandchildren, our environment, and untold future generations. And certainly not without full disclosure, precautions, and aftercare. Can the testing officials really guarantee that Divine Strake will be safe? No. Not from the studies they have done so far. The blast must not happen until adequate, honest studies are completed and verified by competent, independent scientists. Thank you on behalf of these 3 women.
The reason that we came out today is while we have a lot of things to talk about, a lot of ideas that we have, things that are going on that we don't appreciate today, we came out because it's a celebration. We were planning to come out to protest, and Pierre was really excited to shake his fist in the air and shout peace, peace, which we can still do. But so in spite of the fact that, today, instead of coming out for a protest, we're coming out for a celebration because we are so excited that this Divine Strake Test has been indefinitely postponed, which we take to mean that there was too much pressure on the powers that want to be to even attempt to do this. We believe that this is something that was they were trying to do to sort of slip in under the radar, if you will. And a lot of people I know in Las Vegas had no idea that this was even occurring until I started talking about it. And it's been in the paper, and I know a lot of people are busy and haven't maybe read those articles, but the fact that we were all planning to come out here today to protest put it on the radar screen, and I think that made people know that we're all going to know about this, and many, many, many more people are going to come out to protest this. So today we're here for a celebration. Today we're very excited that nothing is inevitable when we have a voice, and our voices can be heard, and today our voices have been heard. So we're so thrilled that nothing like this has to happen, at least for the foreseeable future here on the Nevada test site. So that's why we're here.
Right.
And I should say, too, more importantly, I'm here because I believe that this land is here for our children. And I don't believe that we inherited this land. I believe that we are borrowing it for a little while from our children, and that we need to pass it on in as healthy a state as we can. And as challenging as that can be, that's another reason that we're here. We don't believe that we need to do this to our land. So,
why do you think they want to do this test?
Well, to me, it's very obvious that this is a 700-ton conventional bomb. There is not a vehicle that can transport 1 700-ton device. So to me, it's very obvious that what they're trying to do is test the effects of that amount of power, and the only way to create a device with that amount of power is to use a new nuclear weapon, a new smaller scale nuclear weapon. So I believe that they are using this test to help develop new nuclear weapons technology, which is absolutely offensive to me, considering the fact that we went to war based on this concept of trying to prevent someone from developing weapons of mass destruction. But meanwhile, we want to continue developing weapons of mass destruction on our own soil. You know, how can we possibly justify killing, what are we up to now? Approaching maybe 100,000 people in all, Americans and Iraqis, to prevent the development of weapons of mass destruction, but we can sort of cavalierly, sneak off into the desert and test new devices. I think it's just wrong. To me, it just would seem sort of logical to take the amount of money that we're spending developing these new nuclear weapons, spend it on the economy and infrastructure of the countries that we're impacting so negatively, and become their friends rather than becoming their enemies. I mean, and rather than continuing to create new enemies or stronger enemies that we feel we may have the need to fight in the future. Let's spend the money on their infrastructure, economies. The amount of money that we've spent on defense or offense, really, had we spent that on the infrastructure in Iraq, particularly, we'd be in a different place right now. I think I'm not necessarily sure that this test in particular sends a message that's any different from the message that we've been sending for the last several years. I believe that we have been sending a message of, I'm not articulating it well. Hi, sister. That we are not peaceful people. And I think that message is 100% wrong. And so to continue this, to hold a test like this that will be so visible, just, I think, highlights that kind of, the kind of behavior that we've been displaying of late.